Okay, welcome to the November planning meeting. Please note that the meeting is live streamed and recorded. I'd just like to move straight onto the agenda because I think we've got one speaker here at the moment who I think knows the process of speaking. Yeah. So we'll move on to the agenda. Do we have any apologies for absence or substitutions? Councillor Rachel Ellis.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, please, from Councillors Catherine and Graham Pope. I am acting as a substitute.
Thank you. Any other apologies?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Sam Smith is running a little bit late. He'll be here presently.
Thank you. And I have an apology from Councillor Whiting. We move on to agenda item 2. The draft minutes of the last meeting are included as item 2. I'd like to propose it as a true and correct record of the meeting. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wilkinson, thank you. Any comments on the draft minutes at all? Okay, should we move to the vote? All those in favour of agreeing the draft minutes as a true and correct record, please raise your hands, as you'd already done straight away. Any abstentions? And anyone against? That's carried, thank you. I just want to bring your attention to the planning protocol. Please make sure you're familiar with it. And we'll move on to agenda item 3. Are there any declarations of interest, pecuniary or non-pecuniary? I can't see any, so we'll move on to agenda item 4, which is the development at Baptist Church, Cross Street, Arnold. Just want to check, do we have 2 speakers or 1 speaker at the moment?
There should be 2, but the objector's not yet arrived, so it's
okay.
The applicant who needs to speak first, Mr. Ubi.
Thank you. So we have 1 speaker at the moment, who is the applicant, Taj Ubi. If you'd like to move to the lectern and start speaking when ready. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Taj Ubi and I'm the applicant for the Cross Street Baptist Church. I was born in Nottingham and still live in Gedling. My parents live around the corner from the church just off Cross Street and I've been there for more than 40 years, so we know the area really well. They came to England in the late 60s as immigrants with £2 in their pockets. They first moved to London, then moved to Nottingham, where I was born in City Hospital. Now retired, they've worked hard through their lives and used to run a small family shop. They saved money, enough money to buy their own home since they moved to Nottingham. That took them 10 years. They raised me and my 3 sisters with the same hard work ethic to the point where my sisters are now doctors. I need to put my glasses on. Should have done that at the start. Moving countries with a new language, culture and a way of life was not easy, but they instilled nothing is impossible if you work hard ethic into all of us. I'm hoping I can bring some of that hard work back to Arnold where it all started. My first development of 6 apartments was 15 years ago on Bond Street, just off High Street, short walk from my parents' house. This is now being occupied by young families. I drive past a Baptist church every time I visit my parents' house, and I see it as a piece of Arnold's early history. The church was last used as a place of worship in 2020, and since then has had a number of break-ins and a lot of vandalism. It is now secure but still lies empty and open to the elements. My brief to the architects was to come up with a design that incorporated such an historic part of Arnold's landscape. After months of design work, we have a design with a church in its 100 years of glory, flanked by the existing new build block of York Mews to the west boundary and the proposed new build block to the east boundary, giving the church a balanced outlook and nestling perfectly between the 2 new build blocks. Having lived in Arnold and still shopping locally, I am of firm belief that there is a shortage of quality accommodation for young people and young families in the area who probably work in the town centre. Arnold is a great place to live with shops, bars, restaurants, employment, all captured in the area. People who live in Arnold want to stay in Arnold, as my parents have proven with their 40 years of enjoyment of the area. Our apartments will make great start homes to get young people on the ladder to independence while still working locally. I sincerely hope we can do a little bit towards helping Arnold people stay locally, hence boosting the local economy and adding a sense of community. It would be amazing to be given the opportunity to do something in an area that has given so much to me and my family. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to propose item 4. Oh, sorry, I do it wrong every time. I'd like Claire Turton to introduce the item.
Thank you, Chair. So the application relates to the former Baptist church on the junction of Cross Street and High Street in Arnold. The site is located within the boundary of Arnold Town Centre secondary shopping area as defined by the Gedling local plan. The church building was last used as a place of worship in 2020 and has been redundant since this time. The site itself comprises the existing church building, including its more modern extensions and outbuildings to the east side of the church. Get the pointer to work. If you can see here, these are the modern extensions this side of the church here. And then further to the east of the site, just here, lies an area of overgrown vegetation. Pedestrian access is currently gained from Cross Street and there is no vehicular access to the site. Neighbouring properties are a mix of commercial and residential uses. Full planning permission is sought to convert the church building into 9 residential apartments comprising 6 one-bedroom units and 3 two-bedroom units arranged across 2.5 stories. It is also proposed to erect a new 4-storey apartment block containing 14 one-bedroomed apartments. Ancillary bin stores, cycle stores and landscaping are also proposed. No new vehicular access is proposed to serve the site and no on-site car parking spaces are proposed. So these are the proposed plans. So this is the existing elevation of the church. The proposed demolition highlighted in red, and then the proposed elevations. And this is the proposed elevations of the new build apartment block. Turning now to the assessment of the application. The proposal involves the loss of a place of worship which is classed as a community use in the supporting text to policy LPD 56, protection of community facilities. Policy LPD 56 states that planning permission for development proposals that would result in the loss of existing community facilities will not be granted unless certain criteria can be met. This includes alternative provision existing nearby and it being demonstrated that it is no longer viable to retain the existing community use. The policy states that where it is demonstrated that an existing community use is not viable, preference will be given to the change of use or redevelopment for alternative community uses before other uses are considered. The current use of the site as a church ceased in 2020 when the church using the building stopped meeting at the site. The applicant has stated that the congregation of the church have since attended other churches in the vicinity. The applicant has demonstrated that whilst the building has been subject to extensive marketing, no formal offers have been made to occupy the premises for their continued use or an alternative community use. Next, the principle of residential development on this site and its impact on the vitality of Arnold Town Centre require assessing. Policy LPD 50, development within town and local centres, is relevant. LPD 50 states that planning permission will be granted for development within town centres provided that certain criteria can be met. This includes not resulting in an unacceptable grouping of non-retail uses and not resulting in a significant proportion of Arnold secondary area being non-main town centre uses. In this case, it is clear that both the place of worship and a residential use are non-retail uses, but it is also important to note that neither are defined as a main town centre use. As such, this proposal results in no change to the amount of non-retail uses or non-town centre uses within Arnold Town Centre. The design and appearance of the proposal, as well as issues of heritage, require consideration. So the existing church building isn't listed and it's not located within a conservation area. However, it is considered to be a non-designated heritage asset, as it is a building with a degree of heritage significance meriting consideration in planning decisions. An initial pre-application inquiry for the development of this site proposed the demolition of the Baptist church building. Pre-application advice discouraged this, and this current planning application now sees the retention of the chapel and sees its overall form and many of its details well preserved. The removal of the inappropriate modern additions to the building are also supported. The front elevation and west elevation, which are both the least altered and the most prominent elevations, will remain largely unchanged. The east elevation will see the most change, but this is the most altered existing elevation, and so is the most able to sustain new interventions. The Conservation Officer has raised no objection to the proposal, but has suggested a number of conditions be attached to the grant of any planning permission, ensuring that the detailing for design features on the church building are sympathetic, and this includes precise details of new windows and doors. So overall, subject to conditions, it is considered that the new alterations and additions to the chapel building itself are acceptable. This is a well-balanced scheme in terms of alterations to the chapel and allows for its reuse. With regards to the proposed new build apartment building, historic map evidence demonstrates that this corner plot of Cross Street and High Street was historically built on, and it is not out of character to see a new infill in this area. At 4 stories in height, the proposed new apartment block is taller than most of the structures in this area, as there are no other examples of 4-storey development nearby. The applicant was asked to consider reducing the height of the building to 3 stories, but has not amended the proposed drawings in this respect, but instead has submitted street scene plans showing how the building will sit within its surroundings. And the street scene plans are just here. So overall, it is considered that as a corner block, this site can sustain a relatively prominent structure. In addition, the proposed new build apartment block will not top the chapel for height. And there are also other tall buildings nearby, including the chapel building itself, York Mews and Arnold Leisure Centre. There is no objection to the design of the new build. Its use of red brick and anthracite upper storey blends well with the local area and with the colour palette of the chapel itself. The curve of the structure also relates well to this important junction. The site currently contains an area of planting along its corner boundary with both High Street and Cross Street. This does include some trees. The current planting is overgrown, but nonetheless is prominent and does provide some greenery within the street scene. A full tree report has been submitted in support of the application, which the Council's Arboricultural Officer has assessed and raised no objections to, as the trees identified to be removed are trees of low quality. An area of landscaping, including new trees, is proposed around the new apartment block, and precise details of this should be subject to a condition should planning permission be granted. And turning now to the impact of the proposal on residential amenity, the proposal will not cause unacceptable issues of massing, overshadowing, overbearing or overlooking onto neighbouring properties. And this is primarily due to separation distances, window positioning and building orientation, as explained in section 9 of the committee report. And with regards to internal layouts, the proposals are considered to provide adequate internal space. Turning now to highway safety, there is no vehicular access to the site and no car parking spaces at the site currently that served the previous church use. No new vehicular access is proposed to serve the site, and no on-site car parking spaces are proposed. However, secure on-site cycle parking is proposed. The Council's Supplementary Planning Document, or SPD, Parking provision for residential and non-residential development sets out parking provision requirements. For 1 and 2 bedroomed apartments in an urban area, there is a requirement for 0.8 unallocated spaces per unit. The proposal is for 23 units, and therefore, according to the SPD, there should be a total of 19 on-site car parking spaces provided. The Highway Authority was consulted on the application and was specifically asked to comment on whether a safe vehicular access to serve an on-site car park could be achieved. They commented, and I will quote their comments in full. I have looked at the area surrounding the site and it is covered by a traffic regulation order which protects indiscriminate parking. With the position of the site being on a corner with traffic signals at the side of the site, I don't know where they can get a safe access point if they were to install a car parking area. Given that the site is in a sustainable location and the parking policy is a Gedling Borough Council parking policy, the Highway Authority would not therefore raise any highway concerns. Given the comments of the Highway Authority, it is difficult to see how this site can be brought back into reuse with any on-site car parking provision. On balance, it is considered that the proposal is acceptable with no on-site car parking spaces. The site is located in a highly sustainable location within Arnold Town Centre itself, which contains a number of local amenities, local transport links and public car parks. This is supported by local planning policies. Paragraph 11.6.2 of the local plan states that the change of use of non-residential buildings to residential use can help to provide a range and variety of new homes. In recognition of its importance, and so as to encourage this type of development, the Borough Council may allow lower parking standards in certain circumstances where it is considered appropriate. For example, near public transport corridors or near to shopping centres. And paragraph 4.12 of the Parking Standards SPD states that the exception is that parking standards will be met. However, if the development is served by 1 or more regular public transport service, this may be a material consideration justifying a reduced parking provision requirement, especially if a site is located within or close to a central area. Turning now to planning obligations, the NHS and Nottinghamshire County Council state that this development falls below their threshold for requesting financial contributions towards healthcare and education. The County Council are also not seeking contributions towards bus stop improvements or library stock. However, they are seeking a contribution of £7,200 towards improvements to nearby bus stop infrastructure, which the applicant has agreed to pay. The Strategic Housing Team has commented that for a development of this size, 3 first homes and 2 affordable rent units are required. Paragraph 66 of the MPPF does allow for exemptions to on-site affordable home ownership in certain circumstances, one of which is development providing solely build-to-rent homes, which this site is. As such, in this specific case, it is considered that a commuted sum in lieu of the on-site provision of affordable housing is acceptable. This off-site contribution has been calculated at £146,311 and the applicant has agreed to pay this. Ecology, flood risk and drainage reports have all been submitted in support of the planning application and are considered to be acceptable. This is set out in sections 12 and 13 of the committee report. The archaeology officer has also raised no objection to the proposal, subject to conditions set out in section 17 of the committee report, including an archaeological mitigation strategy. The applicant has committed to providing a 10% biodiversity net gain, or BNG, to that already on site. As much of this as possible were provided on-site with any remaining requirements secured through the applicant purchasing off-site statutory credits from Natural England. This is in accordance with the BNG regulations and will be secured via planning conditions should planning permission be granted. To conclude, for the reasons stated above, it is considered that the proposed development is consistent with local and national planning policies, and as a result, the application is recommended for approval.
Thank you, Claire. Before I propose the item, I'd just like to mention to Councillor Smith, thank you for battling your way through traffic to get here. Unfortunately, the item had started after you arrived, so before you arrived, so you won't be able to speak or vote on the item. Sorry about that. Okay, I'd like to propose agenda item 4 for the purpose of debate. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wilkinson. Thank you. Right. Does anybody want to speak on the item? Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. I think there's no doubts whatsoever that this is a very sympathetic development, and I congratulate the applicant in terms of the work he's done to make it acceptable from a building point of view. I am slightly concerned about the lack of parking, but I think there is a balance to be struck here. We have a site which it would be very difficult to bring back into use with parking provided, and that has been confirmed. I might take a slightly different view if it was possible to provide parking, but at the moment I think I'm minded to support the application as it stands. I understand that others may have a view with regard to the parking provided. However, it is difficult to think of a more sustainable location in terms of public transport anywhere in the borough, and that certainly mitigates against the parking, the lack of parking. So I think all in all, I am, as I said, I am minded to support this. I also like to say that it's very pleasing to see an applicant agreeing to pay all their planning obligations. That seems to be increasingly rare these days, so that is certainly very welcome.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Thank you. Councillor Strong.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad to see that a constructive use is being made of this site. I can understand the difficulties of finding an appropriate use for it, and I echo other comments made about approving the site. I'm glad that the archaeological features will be respected, and I do have a question about burials. There was a reference to burials might still be in situ. Can anybody tell me if these have been cleared or will be cleared before any work continues? Thank you.
So I'm led to believe from the county archaeology officer that there has been some clearance, but they do think there may still be some burials there. So that will need a separate licence. If any remains are found during the build, that will need a separate licence away from the planning system. And it is proposed to put an informative, if planning permission is granted on any decision notice, just informing the applicants that they will need to do that. So yes, they will need a licence, but it will be separate from the planning system.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask about the remaining burials as well, but one other point before some observations. I think it mentions various plaques in the building, and would there be any baptism, marriage, and those sorts of records in there? Will they be sent to the appropriate places? Just to make sure we don't lose that Arnold history, really.
So the internals of the church and any records in there aren't protected because the church itself is not a listed building. It does have some heritage impact, which is why we're classing it as a non-designated heritage asset. But because it's not a listed building, then unfortunately the insides of the church aren't protected in that way.
Okay, thank you. Just overall, I know I do have some sympathy with the Highways Agency in regards of the parking provision, but I also noted that it's 4 stories and the applicant was recommended to reduce that to 3. I think for us to think that 19 dwellings are going to have no cars is probably a bit naive. If those 4 stories were reduced to 3, then that would obviously require less parking spaces. So I would have liked to have seen that. I think furthermore, with 4 stories on the corner, it looks a bit odd to me next to the church and next to the Balfour Club. I think it will be very prominent. And I think having the church there and a 4-storey building on the corner, in my view, is possibly an overdevelopment of the site. So I don't think I'm minded to support it as it is. If it was 3 stories and fewer dwellings, I think it would be a much stronger case. They're just my observations anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Greensmith.
Thank you, Chair. I think most of my colleagues have actually said what my concerns. I will reiterate, I'm concerned about the height of the building being overbearing, the lack of car parking completely, obviously the graves or potential grave situation, and the heritage that could be lost from baptismal records, etc. My other query that hasn't been raised: has there been? I'm assuming the neighbours to this planning application have been contacted, and has there been any response to that? And is there a brief summary?
So yes, neighbours have been consulted and a site notice has been posted at the site. There has been 2 letters of objection, and these are in the committee reports. Pardon? On page 36. So they're summarised in the committee report on page 36. So yes, they have been consulted and there have been 2 letters of objection.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Councillor Knight.
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm inclined to agree with this development. I'm really pleased to see that local assets being sensitively looked after and a local person wants to develop it is even more important to me. I mean, if this didn't go through, I see that the building would become derelict, and eventually at some point it'd have to be demolished, and then you would lose it completely. Also, in terms of the car parking, it's a very sustainable location. Half a dozen buses go past there frequently, and I'm wondering, there are 2 large car parks very close by. Do we offer people season tickets to be able to use those car parks during the day? Obviously, at night time from 6 o'clock until 7 o'clock the next morning, it's free anyway.
Yes, we do, in answer to that. So the car park, the Old Druids Tavern car park, that does, we do offer yearly season tickets. So yes, if they wanted to, these residents could purchase those and they would be able to park there.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor David Ellis.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's not a question, mine's a comment. I'd just congratulate Mr Ubi on working with his architects, and his architects have delivered what he asked them to do. It's a very sympathetic development which will improve that corner significantly. I think looking at the street scene that we were presented with, I think four stories fits well in with that corner. So I'm quite happy to support it wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Shall we move to the vote? We're voting on agenda item 4. The recommendation is to grant permission. All of those in favour? Thank you. That was unanimous. So we'll move on to agenda item 5. The application is for a change of use at 6 Lacewood Close, Bedford. We have a speaker, Moses Sarkar. Is Moses here? If you approach the lectern and press the red button when you want to start speaking, and you'll have 3 minutes, and I will stop you if you're still speaking after 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, Chairperson and members of the Planning Committee. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak in support of our application for change of use for number 6 and number 10 Lacewood Close, Bestwood, from a residential property to a residential children's home. I want to begin by emphasizing that this proposal represents a vital step towards addressing the urgent need for high-quality care and support for vulnerable children and young people in our community. At its core, this application seeks to provide a nurturing, safe, and supportive environment for children who, through no fault of their own, are unable to live with their families. First, I would like to highlight that this application involves no structural changes to the property. The building's existing appearance and character will remain entirely intact, ensuring that it continues to blend seamlessly into the neighborhood. We fully understand the importance of maintaining the harmony and character of the local area, and we have carefully considered how this change of use might affect our neighbors. I want to ensure you that the children's home will operate very much like a family residence, housing a small number of children, 2 and 3 respectively, with the support of professional, experienced, and caring staff. We have planned to ensure that the property remains quiet and well maintained, with clear policies to manage activities to minimize any potential disturbances. This includes controlled staff shifts, quiet hours, and careful management of visitors, which will help us maintain a peaceful environment for both the children and the surrounding community. Additionally, we believe that this children's home will positively contribute to the community by providing these young people with stability, guidance, and opportunities to thrive. With access to education, care, and support, and emotional support, these children will be empowered to develop into well-rounded, contributing members of the society. The home will operate under strict regulations set out by Ofsted, ensuring it meets...
Thank you. Your time is up. Thank you. Nadia Bryan will now introduce the item.
Apologies. We have received one further letter from Bestwood Village Parish Council just expressing similar concerns to those contained on page 61 of the agenda, and primarily around how the home will be operated. And as the applicant has just said, that would largely be under the control of ultimately Ofsted. And please note the next two applications are inextricably linked. And to this end, I shall firstly outline the broad policy considerations which applies to all three before looking at the applications in turn, albeit briefly, and that all the applications are all very similar. The applications fall to be determined against a number of key policies, with the primary policy considered to be LPD 39. LPD 39 indicates that planning permission for such uses will be granted subject to 3 criteria, and its point B is considered to be the most relevant, and that states the proposal would not result in an overconcentration of similar uses in any one area, leading to significant adverse impact on the character of the area. All the applications are similar in form for the change of use from residential properties to one where children are receiving care. And it's apparent in the area that 4 Lacewood Close has planning permission and is operating as a children's home. Subsequent to this, 3 further applications have been submitted for the same use on the same street, namely at numbers 6, 18 and 10, which are considered as items 5 and 6 and 7 on this agenda. The applications are considered in chronological order in that they were submitted, and at officer level, alongside the advice of environmental health officers, it is considered that 2 properties as children's home on the same street would not lead to an overconcentration or be detrimental to the character of the area or residential amenity. However, a 3rd and 4th on the same street would lead to an overconcentration. And just for the avoidance of doubt, LPD 39 is reproduced in full on page 62. And now referring specifically to item 5, this is an application at 6 Lacewood Close. As you can see here, it's highlighted in red. This is number 4, which already has planning permission, is operational, and the one in red is the one that's under consideration as part of item 5. Item 6 is the property to the immediate south, and item 7 is the property to the immediate south, and number 18 I'll show you on a later plan. But specifically with regard to 6 Lacewood Close, it's for the change of use of a 3-bed property which houses up to 3 residents aged between 18 and 17. No physical changes are proposed to the building, and 2 parking spaces would be available, 1 in the garage and 1 in front. Having regard to the policy background that I previously mentioned, with the key consideration being the impact on an overconcentration, we believe that a second property on the street would be acceptable, and based on that fact, we're recommending approval as outlined on page 65 of the agenda. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I'd like to propose agenda item 5 for the purpose of debate. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Pearson, thank you. Do we have any speakers on this item? Councillor Rachel Ellis.
Thank you, Chair. It is an unfortunate fact that some of our children cannot live in their family of origin. And for some of those children and young people, they find it very difficult to actually live in any kind of family. And therefore, children's homes of this particular nature, small, compact, are probably the very best option for those children. That being said, as a local borough councillor and being familiar with the area, I can tell the planning committee that this is a small enclosed estate. I recognise, as has been mentioned, there is already a children's home established nearby which has planning permission. I have no issue with that. However, it is my view that in order for children's homes of this nature to be embedded in the community and to flourish and to form links with the local community, it is better that they are dispersed throughout the community. I am therefore not in agreement with the recommendation that 2 is acceptable. It is my view that another children's home in this estate would constitute overconcentration under our policy LPD 39, and therefore I am minded not to support this planning application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor David Ellis.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to start by thanking the officers for bringing all these 3 reports to the same meeting, although we obviously deal with them separately, we can see the overall picture. And I also recognise that children's homes are important, and this style of children's home is the way things are going. It's the right way. And the applicant mentioned the importance of bringing stability, education and care into children's lives. Also noticed that there's no changes proposed to the building, which is fine. However, I concur with Councillor Rachel Ellis that, in my view, this is contrary to LPD 39. I think, as I understand it, there are 19 houses on that cul-de-sac, and it's those of us who know it, it's very much, it's a walled area, so it's very much isolated. And one in 19 is 5%, 2 in 19 is 10%, and certainly 3 and 4 would be totally unacceptable. In my view, two children's homes, especially if 2 children's homes side by side, represents an over-concentration. Therefore, I will be voting against this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bestwick.
Sorry, it's just a question, really. If we're going to review everyone individually, I don't know if we can review them together, because what we're really asking ourselves is what is an appropriate number, given that all the planning permissions are on the same close, and some of us might think 1 and others might think 2, 3 or 4. If you went along with officer's advice and decided that 2 is appropriate, well, then we come to the problem of which one of the 3 that's being proposed do we choose. So I'm not sure you've got an answer for me, but would it be more appropriate to decide how many is appropriate, if that makes sense?
So each application needs to be considered on the basis of its merits. So you need to make a decision on this application, then we can move on to the subsequent 2 applications.
Okay, thank you.
Any other speakers on this item? Councillor Elwood.
Thanks, Chair. What in the LPD 39, it's referring to over concentration as a factor that would prevent an application being successful. Is there a more detailed definition of what over concentration means? Because to a layman, having 2 children's homes next to each other would, to my mind, indicate over concentration. But I don't know whether that would apply according to the LPD. Thank you.
Realistically, I'm afraid not. It is that classic planning judgment of, realistically 1 is acceptable, but, is 2 an over concentration, or is it 3, is it 4? Really, I guess as officers we consider that 2 will be acceptable, but really it's almost at members' liberty to kind of draw their own conclusions as to where they think that tipping point of over concentration arises. But rightly or wrongly, I'm afraid I can't really give you too much firm guidance, I'm afraid.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. I've been weighing this one up, and in particular the question of over concentration. I think, however, I'm inclined to agree with what others have said in terms of its location. It is a very separate street compared to us, and I am minded to believe that even 2 children's homes on what is a pretty small street would be over concentration in my view.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Shall we move to the vote? So we're voting on agenda item 5, and the recommendation is to grant permission. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? So that was defeated. So I'd like to call for an adjournment whilst we consider another motion on this, this application. And I need a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. So 5-minute adjournment. Okay, I just... Yeah, we're ready to come back. We're just starting the feed. Okay, so item 5 was refused, defeated. So we have some advice from Mr. Avery regarding reasons for refusal.
Thank you, Chairman. So I've listened to the debate and noted members' concerns. So members may wish to propose the following wording. The proposed change of use, if approved, would lead to an overconcentration of similar C2 uses within one cul-de-sac. This is likely to result in a significant adverse impact upon the character of the area. The proposed change of use would therefore be contrary to policy 39 of the local planning document.
Okay, we would need a proposer on the reasons for refusal. Do we have a proposer for reason for refusal? Councillor Rachel Ellis.
I formally propose reserve the right to speak. Thank you.
Those reasons stated by Mr. Avery. Yeah. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wheeler, thank you. Okay, any speakers? Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've looked at this and I've looked at Nottinghamshire Police's report on this, and one of the things that does strike me is the significant risk from a safeguarding perspective for a high concentration of children's homes in that one vicinity. From the perspective of, I noted that Nottinghamshire Police have said here, in terms of the risk of crime and antisocial behaviour, it's a high-risk area. And from a safeguarding perspective, I feel that one home is enough rather than 3 because of the risk of child criminal exploitation and children gravitating to one particular area in that locality, creating antisocial behaviour, but also putting themselves at risk from crime. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? So we'll move to the vote. So we're still voting on agenda item 4 with a new recommendation, which is to refuse. All those in favour? One second, I've just been pulled up by the lawyers. So motion is to include the reasons. We're voting on the wording that Mike Avery proposed. So now I've been straightened out. We'll move to the vote. So it is a refusal. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? So that has passed. Thank you. Right, so now we have to vote on the refusal. Yeah. So the refusal has to be moved and seconded. Do we have a mover for refusal? Yeah, I'm a bit confused. I'm a bit confused, actually. Could we have clarification from the legal officers?
Sorry, the first vote was you were voting for the reasons that Mike had proposed for the refusal. So you need to vote on the specific wording that was put forward, and then you vote to refuse on those reasons.
Sorry, just for clarity, I might be being a bit thick, but if you're voting to accept the wording is refusal because of X, Y, Z. You've refused it, haven't you?
Or is that just me?
Sorry, in the guidance, it says that you need to approve the wording and then vote for the refusal. So that's the steps that we've taken. Well, we haven't taken the final step yet. So if we, through you, Chair, if we could move to that, thank you.
Okay. Right. So if I'm right, we need a proposer and seconder on the refusal. Councillor Rachel Ellis, Councillor Pearson. So now we're voting on the actual refusal, and all those in favour of refusing. Thank you. All those against? Any abstentions? So I think that was a refusal. Thank you. Deep breath. Let's move on to agenda item 5, which is an application for change of use. Sorry, it's agenda item 6, which is application for change of use at 18 Lacewood Close. Nigel Bryan will introduce the item.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, the key policy considerations are those that we've outlined previously relating to LPD 39. Item 6 is for the change of use of 18 Lacewood Close. It's for, from a residential to a children's home. It's a 4-bed property, and there'll be up to 3 children residing at the property. Here's the location outlined in red. The other ones we're looking at were up here. There will be no physical changes to the building. There will be 2 car parking spaces. The recommendation was always to refuse, and is outlined on pages 72, and based on previous decisions, it would be up to members to determine where that over-concentration may well lie. But the recommendation would be as outlined, to refuse, but subject to a refusal. But the recommendation that Mike offered in terms of the final wording, I think should be consistent with that was done for the previous application, if that's the way members are inclined to conclude this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So just to clarify, the reasons for refusal now will be the same as the reasons for refusal that we used in the previous item. Right. So I'd like to propose agenda item 6 for the purpose of debate. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Ellis, thank you. Does anyone want to speak on this item? No? So we're voting. Oh, thank you. Councillor Rachel Ellis.
I know we have to deal with each case on its merits, so I would like to say that my concerns with regard to another children's home on this street remain similar to the ones I expressed for number 6. I do recognise that this is a children's home which is further up the street, but the fact that this is a small enclosed estate remains pertinent. In my view, that this would constitute over-concentration and be against our policy LPD 39. I would also like to draw reference to the results of the consultations which are within this particular report. That is those mentioned by Councillor Wheeler, the concerns of the police, that this might draw young people to the village and might constitute a safeguarding concern with regard to child safeguarding and exploitation. I also note that environmental health have raised concerns, and this is something that we should bear in mind when considering this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Right. So we're going to go around the houses again. So we've got a new reason for refusal.
We haven't decided if we're going to...
Give me 1 second. Could I propose an adjournment just for a couple of minutes? Do I have a seconder? Thank you. So, okay, so the Nigel, Brian proposed a new reason for refusal, which aligns with the reason for refusal of the previous item. We're now going to be voting on this item with that aligned reason for refusal. Councillor Smith.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to be awkward, but if you've moved the recommendations as is written in the agenda pack, that's seconded, there has to be a vote on what's been moved already. If there's an amendment to that, you have to vote down the recommendation that's been moved, and then you have to vote on the amendment. That is the process. I've moved amendments in this planning committee before, and every time you do it, you have to vote down the current recommendation. So we can't have it both ways. I'm not being awkward.
It wasn't moved from the floor. It was presented by an officer. So that's why it's not moved from the floor. It's actually within the present. That's the difference.
So officers can amend recommendations once they've been proposed and seconded by elected representatives.
It was in his presentation, which was prior to me moving it. Yeah. I'm going to get there in a minute as well. Yeah. So, I think, is everybody okay with that? Yeah. So we're voting on item 6, and the reason, and it is, the recommendation is to refuse permission. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? Thank you. So that was carried. So we'll move on to item 7. Application for change of use at 10 Lacewood Close. We have Mr. Moses, if you want to speak again on this item, you can. No, do you not? Do you want to speak again on this item? No. Thank you. Okay, Nigel Bryan will introduce the item.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in respect of item 7, it's a change of use at 10 Lacewood Close, Bestwood. Obviously, we've been through the policy background relating to LPD 39. It's for a change of use of a 4-bed property, to a children's home. There's no physical changes proposed. There'll be 2 parking spaces retained. The recommendation obviously really remains the same as within the committee report, but subject to the amended wording for the reason for refusal. And yes, the recommendation is to refuse. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, so just to be absolutely clear, the recommendation is updated in accordance with the decision that was made on items 5 and 6. Thank you.
So I'd like to move agenda item 7 for the purpose of debate. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor David Ellis. Does anybody want to speak on this item? No. So we'll move to the vote. Voting on agenda item 7, the recommendation is to refuse permission. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? Any abstentions? No, that is carried. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to agenda item 8, which is for noting future applications. Any comments at all on these? Happy to note. Oh, was there a comment at all? No. Happy to note those. Agenda item 9, which is the planning delegation panel action sheets. Are you happy to know? Any comments on these at all? Happy to note them. Thank you. And I have no urgent business, so thank you all for coming to today's meeting, and good night.